Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being with us here today on Thursday, October 28th for the North America, Central America, and the Caribbean regional webinar, Nailing the Undergrad Admission Interview. Hello to those of you who are with us in Zoom and those of you who are with us in Facebook Live as well on Education USA Costa Rica, in case you want to watch this video later on. My name is Mo Burke, and I am the advisor in Costa Rica, and we're going to go ahead and get started because we have a lot to share with you. As you may have realized when you signed up for this webinar, it's a webinar workshop. So the first section will be informative, where you will listen, digest the information, and then we will be moving into breakout rooms where you will be expected to turn on your camera and participate with the wonderful Education USA advisors who will be the moderators in your breakout room. So I kind of already jumped ahead to talk about what we'll be doing today. So let me get ahead and get this shared again real fast. There we go. So first, I'm going to explain what is Education USA. Then we'll go over some frequently asked questions, our services, and then I'll be handing the microphone over to our special guest, Jenni Gargano from Dartmouth, who's going to take you on the ins and outs of admission interviews. We're going to get a quick student experience testimonial, and then we'll go into our breakout rooms. Once the breakout rooms are finished, we will move back here into the main session for question and answer, and then Jenni will talk briefly about Dartmouth. Okay. So what is Education USA? Education USA is an educational advising service that is sponsored by the US government, and we exist in many different countries around the world, and we support and promote the US higher education system, right? So we can help you apply to US universities and colleges, and the best part is that our basic advising services are completely free. We always like to go over some frequently asked questions just to clarify what Education USA is. So the first and most popular question we get is if we are a scholarship program. We are an educational advising program. So we can help you apply and understand the financial aid that you could potentially get from colleges and universities, but we cannot finance your studies. So we are an educational advising program. Oftentimes people ask if we have opportunities for you to improve your level of English. If you're hoping to start in an academic program like a associate's, bachelor's, master's, PhD, you should already have an advanced level of English. If you want, though, there are universities and colleges that offer intensive English programs where you can go and have the same university experience as anyone else, but instead of taking academic biology, math classes, you're going to take intensive English classes. Another question we get is if we can help you find short-term study abroad or internships abroad. We focus on the services offered by US universities and colleges. So we focus on those academic programs, certificate programs, intensive English. It's important, though, to keep in mind with that word internship, that if you study in the United States on an F1 visa, which is the student visa, you can extend your visa with the OPT program after you graduate to work legally for up to 1 year in the United States and get international work experience. So it's a huge advantage to the F1 visa. And another question we get is if we have any agreements with specific universities. Since we are a US government funded program, we are unbiased and we actually represent all of the universities and colleges in the United States. You guys will actually tell us where you want to apply depending on what your interests are, both professionally, personally, and academically. So sometimes after going over those questions, people kind of wonder, okay, so what do you offer then? We offer you support and guidance through the 5 steps to US study, which can take anywhere from 12 to 18 months. So in step 1, we're going to help you research your options, understand the differences between institutions, the differences between the climates, right? Step 2, we'll talk about the different financial aid that can be offered at these institutions or how we can find the most economic option for you. Step 3, in my opinion, is the longest step because it requires, standardized exams, translations, essays, preparing for interviews like this webinar. And once you guys have gotten into institutions and decided where you want to go, we can then guide you through the process of applying for the F1 student visa so that you have all of the documentation and payments and have the best possible chance to get your visa when you go to the US consulate in your country. And step 5 is a pre-departure orientation, which is a workshop or sometimes a series of workshops in which we explain the different things that you're going to face when you get to the US. So how does the US medical insurance work, right? How should you address your professor? Should you call them professor or doctor? What are some cultural shock or cultural differences that you're going to, face when you get to the United States? And remember that all of our services have no cost. So now on your screen, I'm going to launch a poll, and we would like to know from the audience, one, where are you joining us from today? So what part of the world, Canada, Mexico, Central America, South America, or other? What are your experiences with admission interviews? So have you had one yet, or do you have one scheduled, or you don't have any scheduled yet, but you still want to prepare? And then 3, how do you feel about them? Some people love interviews, some people hate interviews. And if you're joining us on Facebook Live, I also recommend that you tell us in the comments how you're feeling about interviews or what experience you have with these interviews as well. So we're going to give you a few seconds to answer, and then I'll share the results. Okay, let's share those results. So the majority of you guys are joining us from Central America, but we also have some people from Canada, Mexico, the Caribbean, and even a few from South America. Hello to those from South America. Thanks for joining. Most of you have not done an admissions interview yet, but that's fine. You may have to do one, which is why we're glad you're being proactive. And most of you don't mind interviews if you have time to prepare for them, but we do have a good group of you that also get really nervous, and that's totally okay. Also, if you haven't noticed, we have some live transcriptions going on the bottom, which is a really cool feature of Zoom that we're excited to be using. So thanks for taking a second to answer that. And now it's my honor to introduce Jenni Gargano, who's a representative at Dartmouth, and an old friend of mine who was once a Peace Corps volunteer here in Costa Rica. We're so happy to have you, Jenni, and to hear all that you have to teach us about admission interviews.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mo. Hi, everybody. My name is Jenni. I am, like Mo mentioned, an admissions officer at Dartmouth. And I am really honored to get to be here this evening, this afternoon, or at whatever time it is for you, to talk a little bit about Dartmouth, but really about the interviews and what you might need to do to prepare for them. Just a little bit about me, in case it might be helpful to know my background. I'm originally from Los Angeles in California, which is on the other side of the United States from Dartmouth. I am an alumna also from Dartmouth College. I graduated back in 2014, and so a long time ago now. And I always love getting to work with high school students because you all keep me very young. While I was in university, I studied history and government and women's and gender studies. And I loved getting to study what I was passionate about and what I was interested in, and thinking about how do I apply that to my future career and work experiences. After I graduated, I worked in what we call in the United States college access and admissions. And so I worked with high school students on thinking about options for after high school. And I also worked in admissions at Dartmouth for a good number of years, where I specifically focused on domestic admissions. And so thinking about students from all parts of the US and thinking about options for college, and particularly Dartmouth. I then met Mo when I was in the Peace Corps, which is a U.S. Federal government program, actually run through the State Department in the United States, and got to work in Covao. So if anybody is in Costa Rica right now joining us, that was my high school that I was placed in, and I got to work with students on English language learning until the pandemic hit in March 2020. And so I came back to the United States and started working again in admissions. I also at the same time and now in graduate school. And so I love getting to think about how education and how students are kind of impacted every single day, and apply that to my learnings in school and also in my work life. And so thank you all for joining me today. And this photo is so old, but I love how young I look. Sorry, we can keep going. Well, we're going to talk about today kind of four main themes on what you should expect when you're thinking about interviews, right? So we're going to be talking about what exactly is the admissions interview. It looks a little bit different for every single school. So we're going to break down some of the options there. We're going to think about who is actually doing these interviews alongside you, right next to you and with you. We're also going to be thinking about, is it required? Is it optional? What do these language pieces, when they say optional or a piece of the application, what does that actually mean for your experience? And then finally, we're going to talk about how much do they matter. I'm going to let you in on a little secret that a lot of this is going to be really dependent on the colleges and universities that you're thinking about, because we all do things a little bit differently. But I'm happy to share what I know. And so we can just kind of dive right in now. So the first thing is, what is an admissions interview? It's a little bit of an interview similar to what you might do for a job or a work experience, and a conversation mixed in together. A lot of times it is a chance to get to know you a little bit more. When we in admissions offices read your applications, you are pretty much a Word document or a PDF on our screen, right? And so the interview gets to add a little bit of texture to your application, right? We get to either be face to face with you, or somebody from our university gets to be face to face with you. But it's also a great chance for you to get to ask your questions and get to learn a little bit more about the university that you're applying to, right? It's a two-way street. You want to make sure that you also, if you have things that are on your mind, that you're at least voicing them, if not also getting the answers for them throughout your time. And so it's a great chance for you to interview the person who you're actually speaking to about the institution that they either work for or maybe they went to. And so we also think about, who does this interview? This depends on the kind of interview that it is. And like I said, right, a lot of this is going to be heavily dependent on the institutions that you're applying to. Sometimes a current student might be the interviewer, right? So you'll speak to somebody maybe not that much older than you, maybe very close to your kind of lived experience, who's going to be talking to you. Oftentimes, though, they're going to be alumni from that institution. Maybe they're an alum who lives in the area that you are from, or who is interested in talking with students from different kind of backgrounds and different locations. So an alum from that institution. Sometimes it might be admissions officers themselves who conduct the interviews. It depends on the school and their policies, their capacity, their resources. So it's not one size fits all. So definitely keep in mind that you should be looking on the websites on what kinds of interviews are offered, if they are offered. They might be in your hometown, right? Maybe they're going to be nearby where you live. I don't think, for right now, I would say most of them are going to be virtually. Travel is very restricted, right, for everybody. And so a lot of times interviews at this moment won't be in person, but they might be one day again. Sometimes they would be on the university campus, where we'll say, students, if you come and visit us, you're going to be able to interview on our campus itself. That's usually not a requirement for students who are coming from outside of the country, but it all depends on the schools. But a lot of them, like I mentioned, will probably be virtual. So over Zoom, over Skype, over Google Hangouts, whatever that might be, they'll be conducting them kind of in that virtual landscape that we're in. And now, is it required? So some schools will say that they require an interview or a video recording as part of their application process, right? And they'll usually have very specific instructions on how to get this done. And if they don't have it, it's helpful then for you to reach out to the admissions office to try to figure out that information and learn from them about what they do require. Some say it's optional. You'll see this for Dartmouth, but at Dartmouth, we list the interview as an optional piece of the application process. That mainly has to do with resources. Sometimes we don't have enough interviewers to be able to interview all of the incredible applicants who apply to us. So we use that word optional to make sure that you know that if you are not contacted, or that if you are not able to do an interview, that it's okay. A couple of things I'll mention about this word optional, though, is that if you are contacted, I want to encourage you to try to do it if you would like to, because you'll get to learn about the school and they'll also get to learn about you, right? Get to add that texture to your application in that process. But two, even if you are not able to do it, but you are contacted, I encourage you to at least let the interviewer know that you are unable to do it. They typically will reach out to you via email. If they have your phone number, they might WhatsApp you or text you, but usually email is the first way that they go. But even if it's optional, I would just say to let them know if you are unable to fit it into your schedule that you're not going to be able to make it work. Because if you don't respond, sometimes interviewers will take that as a sign that you are not interested in the university anymore. And that might not at all be the case, but just let them know that your schedule is not allowing you to do the interview at this moment. And that's totally okay, especially if the language says optional. And then lastly, some schools don't offer interviews at all, right? They'll say, we don't even put this as pieces of the application, so you don't even have to worry about it. They might offer other avenues to get to know you. Maybe they'll do webinars similar to this, where you'll get to ask your questions to an admissions officer or a financial aid officer. Sometimes they'll require a video recording. So for you to Duolingo or initial view or another thing, well, they'll ask kind of specific questions that you just respond to during those videos. And then the last question, right, is how much do they matter? Again, this is dependent on the schools that you're thinking about. Keeping in mind, though, that an interview is usually just one piece of a much larger admissions process and application process. So if you don't have one, or you think that it might not have gone well, don't worry. There are so many other parts of the application that usually can kind of balance that out. But it is one piece that can be really helpful if you end up really loving that part of your process. It's a time where you get to know the college or university, right? You are interviewing these schools to see if they have the things that you want, that you need, that you deserve for your university years. And so definitely use it as an experience to get to know those schools a little bit more, right? And to learn about their offerings and the different opportunities that you might want to take advantage of should you be attending that school. And most times, right, interviews really confirm already what the admissions team sees in your applications. If we see when we're reading your essays and the recommendations from people who know you really well and who have gotten to work with you in high school, if we see that you are an all-star student and a really good community member and a great friend, usually the interviewer picks up on that stuff as well. So they just reaffirm the things that we were reading earlier on throughout the application process and add some texture to it. Again, it depends on the schools and how much they put weight into the interview, but it is one piece of that application process. And so now we would like you to think what helps make a bad first impression and also a good first impression for in your minds. And I think Mo, remind me, is it, okay, good. It's in the chat. Yeah, you can drop it in the chat right there and we'll be able to see. And I think if you're on the Facebook Live, you might be able to put it in there as well. But how do you feel? These are often, right, when you meet somebody for the first time, maybe thinking about how when you met a friend of yours, what maybe rubbed you the right way or what rubbed you the wrong way. How did you feel upon kind of first getting to know someone?
So I have some answers here. Not communicating enough or not showing attention to the interview. I believe that would be a bad first impression. And another response was a bad first impression would be not making eye contact or smiling. And a good first impression would be showing your enthusiasm. Very good, very good. Let's see if we get any other ones.
Those are all great things, right? Like thinking about kind of showing enthusiasm, smiling, that kind of stuff can usually indicate, right, excitement and also appreciation for somebody's time and an interest in them.
Good. So Santiago in the chat said bad would be being unprepared and not giving concise answers or arriving late. Thank you, Kevin. And I got a private message here about a good one being If you act human and have a natural way of talking, then that is also a good sign. So these are great answers. Thanks, everybody.
This one is really great here. Sebastian said you can make a bad impression if you don't know anything about the university, right? And so when you're thinking about jobs or university applications, if somebody's interviewing you, they know usually about the university or job that they currently hold, and they want you to show interest. And so that means that you've done some research, right? You know a little bit about the program, about the offerings, if it's a job, about the job description. And of course, you can ask questions, but knowing a little bit is oftentimes really helpful. These are fantastic. And now thinking about how you should prepare for an interview and what you can do to set yourself up for success when you are in the interview process. And so there's some work that you can do ahead of time, right? And so typically interviews, again, are one piece of the process. So you don't have to stress out a lot over it, but there are some things that you can do to make your life a little bit easier. And preparation is going to be one of them. Here's a list of pretty standard interview questions for the college application process. They'll ask typically to tell the interviewer a little bit about yourself, right? That could be who you are, what high school you go to, what you're interested in studying, what you're really passionate about. They might ask more specifically to Sebastian's point earlier, what made you interested in applying to this university, right? What academic offerings, clubs, opportunities, what really interested you? Why were you drawn to applying? A bad answer to this is, I just read the name and thought it was interesting, right? You want to be able to show specific things that you have learned about this school that really resonate with who you are. Maybe what teacher or class has been impactful. Also, if you do things outside of the classroom, right? That could be spending time with your siblings. That could be a certain activity that you engage with, but what has been important in your life in and outside of school? What do you love learning about? Some schools will require that you already know what you want to study. Some schools won't, right? They'll say just you come to our university and you get to figure it out along the way, but you should have some kind of academic passion and drive in some general topic. Thinking about where are your weaknesses and what do you struggle with? Being able to be vulnerable is important, right? And also showing growth and make sure you have that kind of positive spin on anything. But that's a pretty common question that if you think about ahead of time, you're going to be able to have a really good and substantive response after. Why do you want to go to the US for college? Lots of amazing colleges and universities out in the world. And so what makes the United States and this school more specifically a good fit for you in a place where you really see yourself thriving? What's something that you want to learn about? What's something that you're good at, right? That could be academically, that could be outside of academics, but thinking about, in addition to your weaknesses, what are your strengths, right? What are you really good at? And then also thinking about how can you show interest in your interviewer, because your interviewers are going to be people also, making sure that you have at least one question for them. And that could be about their experiences. That could be about the university itself, and they might or might not have the right answer or a good answer at that time, but at least having one question in mind that you want to ask them is really important. So we have some tips and tricks to do with your interviewer, and you'll learn about these later on, and I'm sure you're thinking about these already, but don't procrastinate, right? Try to do things in a timely manner. If you have to schedule this because it is required, or if you have the option to do it and they encourage you to do it, try doing it quickly. If someone emails or calls you or WhatsApps you, make sure that you respond promptly, right? Because they are a person, they have a schedule, and they're taking time to be able to speak with you, and they're excited to do it, but they want you to kind of show that excitement and interest as well. And so responding in a timely manner is important. be considerate, right? Sometimes, especially for alumni interviewers, these are people who are working all day and then they take time out to do these interviews. And so they're really kind of scheduling this in because they love their institution, their university so much, and they love meeting current high school students who are interested in the university. But show appreciation, right? And just be your kind and really good selves when you're with them. Say thank you. And be prepared and ready to learn, right? Again, have at least 1 or 2 questions for the interviewer. It could be about their personal experiences. It could be about things you're most interested in learning about, but be prepared and show that you've put some thought into it, but that you're also interested in learning more. And there are some more tips and tricks too, right? And so prepare those substantive answers about yourself, right? You can Google common college or university interview questions, and a whole list will come up, and including some of the questions that we had put on the screen a few screens ago, and answer those to yourself, right? Maybe write them out, practice saying them so they sound natural when you are saying them, but be sure that you are prepared to engage about conversation about yourself. Dress appropriately. Even if you're doing a virtual interview, right, you want to make sure that you are clothed, that you are feeling ready, and ready to kind of tackle the day. And in particular, in this virtual world, I think it's really easy to kind of let that go and be like ultra comfortable, but make sure that you are still looking kind of professional and ready. Keep good eye contact and open body language. Try not to fidget too much. This is especially important in person where somebody can really kind of gauge your body language, but over Zoom or over Skype as well. Make sure that you are trying to keep good eye contact, that you're not kind of crouching down, and you're really engaged in the conversation. If you're doing a virtual interview, which I imagine many of you will be if you are contacted to do an interview, try to find a quiet space and a stable internet connection. Sometimes that's really hard to do. And typically the interviewer will be understanding, but just let them know ahead of time if you think that that might be something that's difficult to have access to. But if you can though, right, try to find a quiet room, maybe talk to your counselor at your school or from Education USA if you know them well, and see if they can help troubleshoot any issues with you. Get comfortable bragging about yourself. Sorry, Mo, I apologize. Get comfortable bragging about yourself. This is a big one, right? I think a lot of us tend to shy away from thinking about all of the really cool things that we do and all of the kind of great attributes that we have. But make sure that for the college application process, you are letting your best parts of you shine through, right? And so trying to get comfortable with that, that's why preparing is so important. So you can start to think about those things earlier on and get really comfortable with saying, I'm doing really well in school and I love these subjects and this is why, or I'm a really good friend and here are all of the reasons why I say that. Be sure that you are able to do that. And then try to relax and have fun. We know it's stressful, but getting to know new people is also really fun.
Thank you, Jenni. That was all super great information. And now kind of to echo what everything Jenni just said, we thought it would be great if you guys could hear from a student that actually has gotten through these interviews before. And so we're going to hear from a student named Isaac. Isaac is a sophomore at Tufts University who's studying electrical engineering, and he worked with us in Education USA Costa Rica and applied early decision 2 to Tufts University, which is actually the same institution Jenni's going to in graduate school right now. So they are fellow Tufts students, but Isaac is actually in class right now. He has engineering. So what we did was we talked to him before this and we recorded a short conversation with Isaac. So we're going to watch this recording really fast. And then after that recording, we're going to go into the breakout rooms and see more example interviews that you guys are going to get to analyze and break down. And it's going to be lots of fun. So for now, just sit tight and listen to Isaac's experience. Hi, Isaac. Thanks for being with us today and taking the time to answer a few questions about your interview process. Can you go ahead and introduce yourself for us?
Hi, Mo. Thank you for having me. My name is Isaac Rodriguez. I'm from Perez, Costa Rica. I applied with Education USA towards my application process. And right now, I'm a sophomore at Tufts University studying electrical engineering.
Awesome. And so I remember that you had a couple different interviews when you were applying, right? Do you remember how many interviews and if they were virtual or in person?
Yeah, for sure. So basically, from my list of colleges that I applied, I have 3 interviews. And 2 of them were like virtual because as I'm an international student, I was having that interview in Costa Rica, and 1 interview was in person.
Okay. And the one that was in person was for Tufts University, correct?
One that was in person was for Tufts University. I was made by an alumni of Tufts.
An alumni. And the ones online were admissions officers, alumni or students, or what was it like?
And the ones that were online, they were by current students at those colleges.
Current students. Okay,
Mhm.
so very different experiences. And what are the types of things that you remember that you were asked in the in-person interview for Tufts University
That I will ask or that they ask me?
that they asked you?
Okay. I remember like at first it was like a pretty chill introduction because we were just like, I was just telling him about my background, about my personal academic life, about my social life, about my, like maybe personal interested. But then we moved towards like more focused part of the interview where we were talking about like why I wanted to study at Tufts, like what programs Tufts has to offer me that I have researched, like how did I get to know Tufts University as an international student that has never been on campus, and things like that, like, like more like about like the college, about like how I found myself at Tufts and still like and things like that. So it was what I would consider like 2 parts of the interview.
Okay, and you applied early decision 2 to Tufts University, correct?
Correct. So basically, early decision 2, normally the deadline is like January 1st. So, and because of that, we received like the decision before the normal decision day. So we received it like mid-February. And because of that, like we need to have like the interview like really like after that. So like, after that.
Between the deadline and when you find out.
Exactly. So like, that's why like I have my interview like late January.
Okay, so you applied January 1st, you had your interview late January, and you found out that you got into Tufts on your birthday on February 6th.
That is correct.
Okay, so what do you remember what you wore to your in-person interview?
Yeah, I was wearing formal shoes, khaki pants, and this t-shirt.
That's not a t-shirt, that's a formal shirt, but very nice.
Shirt, yeah.
And would you consider, were you very nervous?
I was nervous, like really, really nervous. Like I remember like before the interview, I was sitting in his not in his office, but like in the main desk. And I was just like waiting there, and I asked like to go to the bathroom like 3 times before the interview because I was super nervous. But after the 3rd time, I was like pacing myself, and I decided like to start the interview with him.
Good. Okay. And do you remember any specific question that he asked you in the interview that you feel that you didn't answer very well, that you weren't prepared to answer?
Yeah, I remember like there was this question that actually made me like super nervous, and that I like, sometimes you it is totally okay to take your time before like answering a question, but sometimes you should not take like half hour before answering a question. I remember like as I was like taking, like maybe like 10 seconds, less than that, like to start answering my questions before I think about the ideas that I was gonna project. For this question, I started like just watching the window, watching the office. I was like, oh my gosh, what can I say? What can I say? And the thing is, like, the question was regarding like how can I like improve the collaborative academic experience that Tufts has like as one of his main values. And I remember like just like out of pocket, I tell like about like a small experience that I have that was like about like 1 week long workshop called CIID, where I learned about prototyping and how did I collaborate with my project co-workers, because like we were like I was not leading them, but like I was like helping them, like getting like all the solutions and like helping them getting all the projects done. So I tried to give that that idea of being collaborative, but like as it was not like as it was like a kind of question that I felt like I was not really prepared to answer, I will definitely try to change my answer if I had like a second opportunity.
Sorry, I was muted. If you had a second opportunity, looking back, like how would you answer that question now?
I would have choose like a long-term opportunity, or sorry, like a long-term experience rather than like a short-term experience, because a long-term experience gives you more content to talk about. It gives you like the opportunity to talk about anecdotes like that you have, like let's say like in a research lab, or like in a class, or like in working a project of a class that was like 6 months long, or like working in a volunteer type of thing that was like over 8 months. You can talk about anecdotes and how do you grow up in that process, in that long-term experience, because normally like I cannot tell you how collaborative I am if I'm telling you about like what I did in 1 week, but I can tell you how my collaborative like personality is if I tell you about like what I did for like a period of 8 months, where I was like constantly like growing up and constantly helping other people.
Great. And my last question for you is, what advice do you have for all of the students who are going to watch this webinar, who are preparing for admission interviews in the next few months?
Yeah, I completely understand that every person is different. Like every person like decide to prepare like in different ways. But like what I will 100% recommend is like to research like the person that's gonna interview you, because you need like to know like if it is gonna be like a current student, if it's gonna be like a college alumni, or if it is gonna be like even like a college like admission officer or something like that. Because even like that, you can like decide what you're gonna wear on the interview, or even like that, you can decide like what kind of topics you can be chill talking about, or like what kind of topic you should not like maybe like mention them. Like you should like in our case as a international student, you can know like if you can even like talk about like something like an experience like being like an international student from your country. Like that's something that I did because he was like an alumni from Costa Rica. So I decided to make like a question, because you always have like the opportunity to make questions too. It's not like you just don't have to answer, you can ask too, and that's completely all right. And I remember like I used to ask him how it's like to be like a Costa Rican and at Tufts University, and he was completely happy to answer that question. So like it is really, really like important to research like your interviewers. More than that, just be yourself in the interview. I feel like with that you will be prepared.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Isaac, for all of this information. And we are excited to see what you do in your next few years at Tufts University. Thank you.
Thank you.
So as you guys could see, Isaac was confirming a lot of what Jenni said, and I hope you had fun reading the transcription at the bottom, because it was not always accurate, and so it was a good exercise for your English listening skills, right? But now to move forward, we're going to get to the fun part with the breakout rooms, and you guys are going to be sent to a breakout room, and in each breakout room, there's going to be 1 to 2 EducationUSA advisors who are going to moderate the discussion. And what Jenni and I did before this webinar is Jenni and I recorded some fake interviews where I am the student and Jenni is the interviewer, right? And so your EducationUSA moderators are going to play you these short videos. And after each video, you guys are going to go through these questions together. So you're going to talk about, did I answer the question completely, or did I not really answer the actual question? Was I talking too long, not enough, or just right? What was my vibe? What was my outfit? What was my background, right? And what do you think about the actual content of my answer? Was it a really nice substantive, can't say that word, answer, or was it really superficial and general, right? So these are things that you guys are going to do in your breakout room. After that, we're going to come back to the main session really quick to answer any questions you may have. And Jenni's going to finish out the day by telling us about Dartmouth. Okay. So again, we're going to ask that you do participate in your breakout rooms and turn on your camera, right? And at this point, we're going to go ahead and end our Facebook Live. So thanks to everyone that was with us on Facebook Live. You're welcome to join in on Zoom if you can. So let me go ahead and stop the Facebook Live. Okay.